Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And I am honored to introduce this week's guest. Today's guest is Andy Weins. Hi, Andy.
Hey, good to be here.
Good to have you. So, Andy, we're going to start with your bio, and then we are going to have a great conversation.
Yep.
So, Andy, you are a veteran and fourth generation business owner known for bringing the bottom line up front.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mindset. That's a mindset to growth minded business leaders. So if you're a growth minded business leader, that's for you. So you definitely have done speaking engagements and you use data-driven methodologies and battle-tested experience to give audience practical takeaways. And you're also an author of 2 books.
Correct.
Okay, well, that's very interesting in terms of your life. So, fourth generation business owner. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I grew up, my parents own a business. I joke that I come from a long line of unemployable men, men that work really hard to not have a job. And so I grew up watching my father as a carpenter work his way from being employed and working for somebody else to ultimately saying, I've had enough, I'm going to go out on my own. And then I also spent my summers up north, my grandparents' farm. And all the while I heard stories about my great-grandfather who had a salvage business, so salvage and scrap, ran some landfills. And so I always had this idea that to be a man, you kind of, set off on your own path. And so I deviated. I spent years in corporate America. I spent years in the military. And about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, I decided, you know what? It's time for me to pave my own path in this world. And I haven't looked back since.
Good. So what business did you start at that time?
So at the time, it was called Green Up Solutions, and I was doing environmental consulting. And I quickly realized that people were not going to pay me for merely my perspective or opinion. And so quickly shifted into doing junk removal. I'd had a past of cleaning out houses and helping with moving and, side hustle at best. And I turned junk removal into a full-time endeavor. I got involved with a franchise. I was the top franchise my 3rd month in business. And eventually I separated and parted ways with the franchise. And now I own the largest independent junk removal company in Wisconsin. And I continue to do work within the industry, really focused on sustainability and how do we build processes to build any efficiencies and keep material out of the landfill. So that's my, in the business journey that got me here today.
That's great. How big is your business?
Right now we had 20 employees. We'll ramp up to close to 30 in the summer, do about $3 million in top line revenue. And then, like you mentioned before, this experience of running a business has led to 2 books. My newest book is all about data. One of the things that, I love about this opportunity that we have is all about systematizing your business. And I'm a data-driven individual. So it's really how do I find the data that drives the business and how do I get more results based on the data. And I have the opportunity with the junk removal company to consistently test new theories and then bring those methodologies to other businesses to see if they still hold true. There's some things that work within the person's business or my business, and as soon as you take them out of my business, they're no longer applicable. So now I've been really fortunate the last couple of years to test my theories in business and bring it to a wider audience and multiple disciplines, not only blue collar, also white collar and professional industries.
So let's talk about your theories and your methodologies. So what are some of those?
The biggest one that I stumbled upon through years of doing consulting for people is data-driven decisions. What I realize a lot of business owners and people do this all the time. They will make a decision or come to a conclusion, and then they'll go find the information that supports their conclusion. And I remember that in college, I wrote papers and it was like, take a stand on a particular issue. And so what did you do? You took a stand and then you went to go find the articles and the data to prove your theory. We were trained that in high school and college, right? Prove your theory. And now there's a chance that your theory is, not proven. And yet it also kind of felt like a failure. Like I thought this and so I'll say me, I would find articles and data to support my initial assumptions. And I realized, wow, how backwards is that? And so in my business, I started looking at my profit and loss statements, my balance sheets regularly. I got a B minus in accounting in college. The only B minus I got all of college. And then I became a master of QuickBooks. So I can tell you, I'm a really poor accountant and a great bookkeeper. And then I transformed that into be a fractional CFO because time and time again, I would be consulting with business owners and I say, okay, where's the data to prove this theory? Because they're like, oh, our commercial business is doing great. Sounds good. How do we know that to be true? Well, the phone's been ringing. Okay. What does that mean? How much did it ring before? How much does it ring now? What percentage of your business is commercial? What is your customer acquisition cost on commercial? What is return on ad spend with commercial versus residential? What's the lifetime value? I'm starting to ask these questions that are great questions to ask, questions that I have the answers to within my business. And I realize time and time again, business owners make decisions on assumptions. And then they wonder at the end of the day, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, where's all the money? Why did I work so hard? And
so what are some of the questions that you would recommend to business owners that are listening to us right now to ask themselves?
Those questions start there, right? What are the lines? What are the products you serve, or what are the products you sell, and who do you sell your products to? It sounds very simple. Those three things. I tell you need three things in business. You need to have a product or service. You need to have someone that's going to buy that product or service, and you have to have a reason why they buy yours over others. Because you're probably solving the same problem, right? For example, you go to a McDonald's or a steakhouse. They solve the same problem. You're hungry, you want something to eat. They solve the same problem. And yet they clearly know who their customer is versus who they aren't because they know how they solve the problem. There's a lot of business owners I'll ask very simple questions. Who do you serve? Well, anybody and everybody. Well, if your product is for everybody, then no one's going to buy it because now that customer isn't unique. And so when I say, well, who's your customer? Well, I don't know. Well, let's get some demographic, psychographic information on them. That's data. Then we say, what do they buy? Well, if I have a customer recently, $780,000 in revenue last year, all in services. Well, how do we know what we're even selling? When we have 4 or 5 different services, it's all lumped together. Well, how do we know what percentage is what?
And so, but it's also to your point that who do we serve? Like people can say, they can give an idea, but I think to your point of data driven, look at your P&L and look at your customers for clients for the last, let's say 4 years. Where did they come from? Where are 80% of your revenue comes from whom, right?
Yes.
Because somebody can say, oh, my customer is such and such, but that can be also an opinion and an assumption. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fact.
And the other thing it leads to is, okay, let's say 80% of your customers are this. Are those the customers you want? Because sometimes the answer is no. These are the customers I have. Netflix. Netflix is a prime example. At one point, Netflix, 99% of their revenue came from selling DVDs. Netflix realized if all we are is an online store to buy DVDs, we do not have a competitive advantage. They took the 1% of customers that were renting DVDs and built the business they have today. Not because they said, well, that's what people are buying. We would have never heard of Netflix had they been an online seller of DVDs. Why? Because Amazon would have trumped them. Anybody else, right? Or even now, there are no DVDs, right? So they could have been the best DVD website in the world, and yet no one would care because as soon as people stopped buying DVDs, they would have been out of business. They looked at that 1% of customers and said, okay, Who do we want to sell to? Actually, we want to sell that. So they stopped selling DVDs and only went down the rental road because they said that's our differentiator. Again, they know how they solved the problem versus everybody else. Because back in the day, what was the solution? You wanted a DVD, you either went to the movie theater, you went to Blockbuster, or you waited for it to get into syndication on TV. Those were your three options. And they said, hold on, how about option four? How about you pick from a bunch of movies and we mail them to you in your mailbox? Oh, they solved the same problem as a movie theater. They did it more efficient, less hassle at a lower price. Because ultimately, what was the problem? I want entertainment. Well, that was interesting. So the other thing you said is the 80/20 rule. 80/20 rule applies universally. It is a universal truth in this world. I was at a seminar about 4 years ago, and it was a realtor seminar. And they said in our realtor team, our realty team, we looked at 20 different ways that realtors can acquire customers. Networking events, cold calling, cold knocking, friends and family, referral, ice cream social, you name it. And they determined that 83% of their customers came from three different lead sources. That's it. And now they tested this again at another real estate office. And guess what? 82% of all their customers came from three different sources. But here's the deal. The three sources from the first agency and the three sources from the second agency were different. It was a different city. It was a different market. It was different agents. So here we are, two groups of people, same banner, same company, selling the same product. And what do they determine? That over 80% of the realtor or 80% of their business came from three lead sources. So the question is, why are you taking a $100,000 budget and spreading it across 20 different buckets when you could take a $100,000 budget and put it across three buckets? How much more impact? And again, how did they know that? They collected the data. That's the challenge that business owners have. Every time I sit down and do budgeting with my clients when we're first starting off, when I'm doing fractional CFO work, they always say the same thing. Wow, that's where my money went. I didn't realize how much I spent. I'll challenge you now. Look at your credit card statement, do a budget, just for personal spending. And you'll be like, wow, I didn't realize I spent that much on fast food. If I asked you, or going out, let's just say going out, Starbucks, fast food, whatever. And if I asked the average person, I don't know, maybe like $100 a month I spend on that stuff. And then it's probably close to like $100 a week in ancillary spending. Why? Because you're looking at the data. That's it. That's such a simple thing. Look at your credit card statement. And don't only look at it, add it up. Put it on an Excel spreadsheet, chicken scratch it, whiteboard it. I don't care. Look how many dollars. Most people know how much money they make. They have no clue how much money they spend. They know how much they make. They know their mortgage. They know their car payment. They might know their insurance. They know their cell phone bill. They know their bills. People are pretty good about their bills. And then all of a sudden there's 500, 2,000, whatever dollars a month. They're gone every month and people have no clue. Now multiply that by 10, maybe 100. That's business. All of a sudden, when you're bleeding $5,000 to $20,000 a month on ancillary spending, you'll start asking a lot of other questions. So the question is, how do you, as a consultant and CFO, I never have answers. My new book that came out, Stop Avoiding Your Numbers, has no answers. There's over 100 questions to ask yourself within the book, and there's information only. Hey, this is what normal looks like. This is what most business owners feel. This is what people are going through. Not, here's the answer to your very specific problem. Because at the end of the day, as a human, as a business owner, you have the answers within you.
That's right.
It's my responsibility, your responsibility. What do? We ask people questions, and then we put the data into, some structure, and then it gives us very clear and logical courses of action.
Absolutely. Andy, how do you use AI for gathering data?
It's a
loaded question.
No, oh my God, it's so loaded. I used AI earlier today for a customer to scrub to look for we pared down their ideal client, right? And I said, how many of these exist in your market? They're like, well, I don't know. So we have an AI agent we use to say, okay, how many people in these list of zip codes or this many miles have these things? And then all of a sudden, wow, we have a hot list. We have a hot lead. We now, in a very simple way, have taken data, known data, and now have predictable indicators whether or not the market can support this particular product or service based on the parameters we put into it. I mean, that's like what we did today. Yesterday, I have AI read sections of contracts and scrub it down for the average person. I was in an AI seminar about 3 months ago, and they said, AI is going to take my job. No. AI is not going to take your job. Someone that knows how to use AI is going to take your job. So because it's not about having less jobs, it's about being more efficient with the work. I was at another AI seminar like a year ago, and it's like, okay, we have AI, and people are concerned AI is going to ruin the workplace. Let's just ruin the workplace as like this broad, big, hairy, demon.
It doesn't. What are the facts, right? That's where
exactly.
You start looking at numbers.
So let's look at this, right? 20 years ago, people said the internet was going to disrupt business. Guess what? It did, and for better. 20 years before that, it was computers are going to disrupt business. Yeah, they did, and it was for better. Every 20, 30 years, we have something that disrupts business. And guess what? It's for the better. I do a workshop on conflict. I talk about disruption. Disruption is having new conversations with new people. That's what AI is. All of a sudden, we're asking AI to do things that we've never thought of before. My wife and I recently bought a house, and there were several times where she's way more advanced in AI than I am. She would just copy and paste parts of this contract, put it into ChatGPT and say, read this back to me in common language. And it would take a paragraph of legalese, right? And say, okay, this happens, then this, then if this happens, then that. We're like, oh, okay, that's a lot simpler to understand versus the shall not, will, like the legal language is shall and shall not, and coulda, woulda, shouldas. And so AI is here. You're either using the tool to reduce the time it takes to do work, or someone else will figure it out. The best way I can tell you this is in a lot of what I do, process improvement with people. It's 10, 80, 10. So first 10% is the visionary. 80% is done by the leadership team or the workers. And then last 10% is also taken on by the visionary. That's what AI is. Take the 10%, the first 10%, prompting it questions. It does 80% of the work. And then you use the last 10% to analyze the data.
Absolutely. Wow. Andy, if our listeners would like to reach out to you and learn more about what you do and have a conversation with you, how can they do that?
Find me on LinkedIn. It's one of the ways we found each other. It's through networking. I tell people I'm one of the simplest people on the internet to find. My phone number is on my LinkedIn account. That's how simple I am. Email address is there. Also my website, andyweins.com, where I talk about speaking, the books I've written, workshops I do. I love being a business owner, and I love being around other business owners, business leaders, to share the lessons learned through data-driven decisions.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you for being a guest on this podcast. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.